Margaret Collins had lived a life most people would call full, but now, at 69, it felt quiet, too quiet. Her husband, Thomas, had passed 5 years ago, leaving her alone in a house that once rang with laughter. Friends often called or stopped by. But the constant busyness of their lives made her feel invisible, as if her own story had paused. She filled her days with simple routines, morning tea, reading the newspaper. Tending to her small garden, but inside there was a restlessness she could not shake. Some nights she would sit by the window, looking at the harbor, feeling the chill of the wind and thinking about time, memory, and the life she had once imagined for herself. Margaret had loved deeply and truly, and losing Thomas had left a space she did not expect to be refilled. She had mourned quietly, carried grief like a folded blanket that weighed her down but kept her warm. People told her time would heal, but she realized time simply stretched the silence into something permanent. She had settled into life, accepting its quiet rhythm. Yet part of her longed for more connection, laughter, and perhaps a hint of excitement she had not felt in years. One crisp autumn morning, Margaret did something entirely out of character. She signed up for a community writing group at the local library. It was a small, cozy place with wooden floors, low shelves, and sunlight spilling through tall windows. She had no real reason for joining, a vague hope that trying something new might stir her heart awake. She arrived early, a little nervous, and found a circle of chairs with other participants already seated. Papers and pens were scattered around. Among the participants, one man caught her attention immediately. His name was Robert Hayes. He was 72, with silver hair and gentle, calm eyes that seemed to see more than they should. He spoke softly when it was his turn, telling small stories about teaching history, about the lives hidden in the pages of old books. Margaret felt drawn to his presence, not in a sudden, overwhelming way, but in the quiet recognition of someone who understood depth and subtlety. She tried not to notice him too much, but she failed. And every time he smiled at a shared joke or nodded at her words, her chest warmed in a way she had not felt in years. When it was her turn to read, Margaret held her paper tightly, her hands shaking slightly. She read a short piece about the ocean, waves, and loss. Her voice trembled, but as the words left her mouth, a strange calm spread through the room. The group listened silently, and when she finished, Robert was the first to nod appreciatively. "That was beautiful," he said simply, without exaggeration or flattery. Margaret felt her cheeks flush. She mumbled a polite thank you, but inside, her heart raced. After that first meeting, they began to talk more. Small, casual conversations about writing books and the changing seasons. They shared coffee after sessions, laughing softly at minor confusions and gentle misunderstandings. Robert spoke of his late wife, Ellen, without bitterness or sorrow that weighed down the conversation. Margaret, in turn, shared some memories of her life with Thomas. These conversations were never rushed. There was a patience to Robert, a careful listening that made Margaret feel heard in a way she had not felt in years. Margaret noticed little things about him, the way he waited for her to finish a thought, the softness in his laughter, the way his eyes seemed to notice details others might miss. Slowly, she realized that she was looking forward to seeing him, wondering about the next conversation, feeling a warmth she had thought belonged only to her memories of Thomas. She told herself repeatedly that this was just friendship, a harmless companionship to fill quiet hours, yet deep down, she knew something different was growing, a connection that went beyond casual friendship. One crisp afternoon, Robert invited Margaret to walk along the harbor. The sky was pale blue, clouds drifting lazily, and the air carried a faint scent of salt. They talked about simple things at first: birds, the rhythm of the waves. Then the conversation shifted to more personal topics: aging, solitude, and the unexpected turns life takes. Margaret admitted, hesitantly, that she had thought passion and excitement were things of the past. Robert looked at her, calm and honest, and said quietly, "I thought the same. But passion doesn't disappear. It just changes shape." That evening, Margaret returned home with a restless heart. She tried to push down the strange, fluttering feeling inside her. She reminded herself she was alone, that she had her memories, that life at her age was meant to be peaceful. But peace had grown too quiet. This new feeling, this stirring, was alive and insistent. She wondered if she was foolish to hope, if she was betraying her memories of Thomas. Yet as she lay in bed, she realized the truth: she had been waiting, even unknowingly, for something like this. Over the next few weeks, their friendship deepened. They met outside the library, went on small walks, drank tea, and shared stories of their lives. Margaret found herself laughing more, thinking about Robert when she was alone, feeling a warmth she had not experienced in years. She began to notice her own excitement, returning the small thrill of anticipating a conversation, the comfort of a shared silence, the gentle attention he gave her. Margaret also felt fear. Fear of hope, of loss, of heartbreak. She wondered if she was too old for such feelings, if she was daring fate by allowing herself to feel alive again. Each time she tried to push the feelings away, Robert's presence reminded her that life still held surprises. Their connection was not rushed. It was steady, deepening with each shared moment, each laugh, each quiet understanding. Then came the day Robert invited her to a longer walk along the harbor during sunset. The sky glowed with shades of orange and pink. The water shimmered, calm yet alive. They walked side by side, shoulders brushing slightly, enjoying the silence that spoke louder than words. At a quiet moment, Robert said, "I didn't think love could feel like this at our age." Margaret looked at him, feeling the same truth in her chest. "Neither did I," she admitted. That evening, Margaret returned home with a sense of wonder. Her life had shifted in subtle, irreversible ways. She was no longer just a widow living quietly. She was a woman capable of hope, capable of joy, capable of connection that stirred her heart. She realized that love did not belong only to the young. It could come later, quietly, unexpectedly, and yet with a force that made every past sorrow feel less lonely. The days passed, and their friendship grew into something neither could define fully yet, but both felt deeply. Margaret noticed her own reflection differently in the mirror. Now, not just an older woman, but someone alive, radiant with a warmth that came from being seen and understood. She had begun a journey she had never expected, a late chapter in her life that promised more than possess, promised excitement, companionship, and a second chance at love. By the end of part 1, Margaret understood that her life had shifted. She was standing at the beginning of a story she had not imagined for herself, and it was filled with hope, emotion, and the thrill of connection. The quiet life she had known was changing. Something new had arrived, and it was already too late to turn back. Margaret did not plan to fall in love. It arrived anyway, moving faster than her careful thoughts could stop it. After the night by the fireplace, something shifted between her and Robert. There was no turning back to polite distance. They both felt it. Clear and steady, winter settled hard over Maine. Snow-covered sidewalks. Days grew short. Margaret and Robert met often now, filling those cold weeks with warmth. They walked when the weather allowed, shoulders brushing under thick coats. When storms came, they stayed indoors talking over soup and tea, sharing stories that had waited years to be told. Robert spoke of his childhood in Vermont, of classrooms filled with restless students, of the quiet pride he felt when someone finally understood history, not as dates, but as human lives. Margaret shared her years as a nurse, the long nights, the grief she carried home, the way she learned to be strong even when she felt small. They learned each other's habits quickly. Robert always arrived early. Margaret always noticed small details. He liked silence in the morning. She liked soft music at night. None of it felt difficult. It felt natural, as if time had been preparing them. Still, fear followed Margaret closely. Late at night, when she was alone, she wondered if she was moving too fast. She worried about loss. She worried about judgment. She worried that hope might hurt more than loneliness ever did. One afternoon, she tried to pull away again. She canceled dinner with a short excuse. The next day, she skipped a walk. Robert did not push, but his absence felt louder than any argument. When they finally met again, Robert looked at her carefully. "You don't have to protect me," he said. And you don't have to protect yourself from me either." His words landed gently, but they stayed. Margaret realized she was not afraid of Robert. She was afraid of being alive again. Spring came slowly. Ice melted. The harbor changed color. With the longer days, their world grew larger. They traveled short distances, small towns, quiet cafes, places where no one knew their past. They laughed more. Margaret noticed she laughed easily now, without thinking, at a friend's gathering. Someone asked how long they had been together. Margaret hesitated. Robert answered simply, "Long enough to know it matters." That night, Margaret stood in front of her mirror and barely recognized herself. Her eyes looked brighter, her posture lighter. She felt older, yes, but also fuller, as if something inside her had finally woken up. Robert met her family first. Her daughter watched closely, protective but curious. After dinner, she hugged her mother longer than usual. "You seem happy?" she whispered. Margaret nodded. Surprised by how easily the word came, meeting Robert's circle came next. Old colleagues, friends who had known Ellen. Margaret felt nervous, unsure of her place. But Robert stayed close, never leaving her side, never making her feel like a replacement. She was not stepping into another woman's life. She was building her own. One evening, sitting on a quiet porch, Robert asked Margaret what she wanted now. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now she thought carefully. "I want peace," she said, "and excitement. I want both." Robert smiled. "So do I." They spoke openly about their age, about health, about time. These were not heavy talks. They were honest ones. They knew their years were precious, not limited. That made every moment sharper, more meaningful. Margaret noticed how deeply Robert listened. Not waiting to speak. Not correcting. Just hearing. She realized that was the heat people talked about. Not desire alone, but connection. The kind that warmed slowly and stayed. One day, Robert fell ill with a bad flu. Nothing serious, but enough to remind Margaret how fragile life could be. She stayed with him, caring without hesitation. It felt familiar, comforting. He watched her quietly, gratitude in his eyes. Later, when he recovered, he said, "I don't feel alone anymore." Margaret understood. Neither did she. Summer arrived, bringing open windows and long evenings. They attended outdoor concerts, sat by fires, shared memories under stars. Sometimes they spoke of Thomas and Ellen. Sometimes they didn't. Love made space for both past and present. There were moments of doubt, a missed call, a quiet mood. But instead of pulling away, they talked. They chose clarity over fear. Each time, their bond grew stronger. Margaret realized love at this stage of life did not rush. It did not demand proof. It showed itself in small, steady ways, in patience, in trust. In choosing each other again and again. One afternoon, while watching the ocean, Robert took her hand. "I don't know how many years I have," he said, "but I know how I want to live them." Margaret squeezed his hand. "So do I." She no longer thought of age as a warning. It was a gift. It stripped away games. It made love honest, bold in its quiet way. At 69, Margaret felt alive, not because she had found someone new, but because she had allowed herself to feel deeply again. Love did not ask her to forget. It asked her to continue, and as the sun set, painting the sky in soft colors. She knew this chapter was not an ending. It was a beginning she never expected, and one she was finally brave enough to embrace.